Welcome to another weekly LinkedIn Live. I am here with an amazing woman, and this is another Ask the Author session. I'm here with Dr. Louise Lubin, and she is a clinical psychologist and has practiced adult, marital, and family therapy for 40 years. Her book, if you can hold it up, Louise, Your Journey Beyond Breast Cancer, Tools for the Road, as well as her programs and website, Many Paths to Healing, offer individuals the life skills to cope with the ongoing challenges of cancer. And I would just add this book is actually for anyone going through a serious illness. It's not only for breast cancer or for cancer. Um, Dr. Lubin, thank you so much for joining us for this live interview. I'm so excited.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Andrew, for having me.
Yeah, so we have spoken before, but this time we're going to do a deep dive on your book. So you've been in practice for a very long time. So I want to ask you why this book and why now?
Okay. Well, I guess in some ways, this book is a culmination of 40 years of working with individuals with chronic and life threatening illness. And I've gathered over the years a whole lot of what I think are helpful tools to people to be able to cope. I think we all need to have tools when we're facing any kind of serious life challenge. We don't just come into this world knowing what to do. And not that this is all inclusive, but this book is my attempt to pull together the many tools that I've learned from reading, from workshops, from working with people, and offer it to them so they can look at it as they need it and what's appropriate for them at the time of where they are in their particular journey. Because it's so important to realize, and I say this so much, Andrea, there is no one right way to go through cancer, and there's no one journey.
Yeah.
Everyone is more than a statistic.
Ugh,
And yet there are certainly common themes that go on in a process whenever we experience a serious situation, a loss, a trauma, a serious illness, but everybody is individual. So the tools that may be right for you are not necessarily right for somebody else. So I tried to pull together a lot of different ones that I have found helpful. And I guess in some ways it's my way of also kind of pulling together my career in some ways, you
yeah.
know.
Oh,
So that's why
absolutely.
now.
So I want to recommend for anyone who gets this book something I would never recommend. Certainly not with fiction, but not even with nonfiction. But with your book, it really works. I'm going to recommend you start at the end. So anyone who gets your book, I think you say this in the preface, but you can skip around. And if you go toward the end of the book, there's a summary of how the book is laid out, the structure of this book, which I think is just genius. So, just for people watching who haven't picked up the book yet, what I love about it is there's a theme or topic for every chapter. And then in every chapter, there are tools for your body, tools for your mind, and tools for your spirit. I think that is brilliant. And then on top of that, there's a section for resources for every chapter. And I've gone through and I'm like looking at all these books, the ones I've read, the ones I haven't read, as well as the website. So you've done an amazing job of documenting all of your resources, but also just laying things out. So for example, if I wanted to look at navigating the exit ramp. If I'm at the end of my treatment and I only want to just look at that chapter right now, I could. So I think this is brilliant as a writer. I remember one time I asked a mentor of mine, I said, "Man, how do you figure out the structure of your book?" And she laughed so hard and she said, "That's the question, right?" Because that truly is
Mhm.
everything, how you choose to tell stories. So, how did you come up with the structure for this book? I'm just going to nerd out for a minute. So,
Okay. It's really not that complicated for me because Basically, the book is about healing.
Hmm.
Okay. The book is about finding a new balance, finding a sense of wholeness when you have been diagnosed with, in this case, breast cancer.
Right.
Okay. And it is my belief, and on my website, I have a logo. Okay. And it's mind, body, spirit.
Hmm.
Okay. Many paths to healing is mind, body, spirit. So, whatever issue is addressed in the book, okay, you must look at and understand and gain knowledge of your body. You must understand how the power of your thoughts and your mind play a role in your healing and your health. And you must connect to spirit. And when I say spirit, what I mean is that sense of some something bigger than yourself. It's not
Right.
necessarily religion, although that is for many people where
Right.
they get their spirituality. Other people get it in nature and all other kinds of ways. But
Right.
the reason the book is put this way is because each of these topics, whether we're talking about the unknown uncertainty that you get when you get a diagnosis, when you deal with that anxiety, that fear, you must look at it holistically. Okay. The mind, body, spirit, is a holistic, it's an integrative way of looking at how you're going to find a new balance. And that's what healing is. And I will say this with cancer. Everyone, when they get diagnosed with anyone who has a diagnosis of cancer wants a cure.
Of course.
Okay.
Yeah.
They want the absence of disease. That's what cure is.
Yep.
And that's what our medical community has done such amazing development to help us bring cure. And many people get a cure. Many other people do not necessarily have a total absence of disease. They
Right.
live with cancer, but that does not negate their ability to work towards healing. And the reality is that we're all seeking healing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not some mystical kind of concept. It's finding your balance. It's finding your wholeness. WHOLENESS. Okay. And so that's why each chapter has got mind, body, spirit, because holistically you have to look at your issues, the issues dealt with in this book, from that circle of mind, body, spirit. So
Well, you
long
touched
answer, but that's
No, you
why.
touched on such an important, not even idea, but an important theme. So I'll just let people who are watching this now or later know that I've already interviewed you for our Cancer Youth Thrivers podcast, and your episode won't be out for a while. But I have done, I think, over 75 interviews now, and I always ask this one question consistently: what is one thing, if you could only do one thing to improve healthcare in the U.S. or Canada or whatever country that person's in? What would it be and why? And now, after over 75 interviews, the number one thing, regardless of country, the number one thing is a more integrative approach to medicine, to bring together what is considered Western and Eastern medicine when it comes to treating cancer. And that's one of the things I just love about your book is that's exactly what you do with these tools. You make no bones about it. Yes, there are tools for the body, but there are also tools for the mind and the spirit. And I can't think of anyone who would disagree with you. I mean, I just can't. That's the
No,
number one
I think
answer.
we've got to move towards a more integrative approach.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean that one's more important or less important, that they're all important. And looking at people holistically,
Yeah. Yeah.
is also part of what we have to work towards.
Yeah. I totally agree. And if you are watching this live or watching the replay, whether you're watching on LinkedIn or YouTube or Facebook, I almost forgot. And if you have any questions for Dr. Lubin, please put them in the comments. If you're on LinkedIn specifically, be sure to tag her so she will actually get notification of that comment. And keep watching because we will let you know at the end how to get in touch with her. So I want to move on to something that touched me very personally in your book. You say in the book, this is a direct quote, that anxiety is always about the future. And you just mentioned that a cancer diagnosis comes with anxiety. So, can you talk a little bit more about that? Because I am definitely someone who I'm prone to depression, but it comes with a lot of anxiety, which
Often does.
yeah, and it I don't think people know that though, and it really
Mhm.
affects my sleep. I've always had difficulty sleeping. And I think I reread the chapter about sleep hygiene twice, and I'm like, I do all those things, and I still have trouble. So, talk to us a little bit about anxiety.
Okay. One of the things that happens when you have a serious life change, okay, cancer, when you are told you have cancer, you begin a journey of the unknown,
Yeah,
okay? You are always worrying about what's going to happen. Is the cancer going to return? Now that's a big. Over the years, Andrea, many of the people that I have seen in my practice have actually finished their treatment. Okay, they are done with their chemo and their radiation, and they then are sort of let out on their own. The doctor
right.
says you're okay. You'll be okay, and we'll
Yeah,
see
bye
if you
bye.
follow up
Yeah,
in 4 months or 6 months or whatever. And the focus is the cancer going to return?
yeah,
Okay. And a lot of people, when they stop active treatment, fear like, well, I'm not doing anything. I'm not doing anything. So, what's going to happen? And the anxiety is about what if,
mhm,
okay? What if this happens? And again, it doesn't necessarily have to just be about cancer. What if I said something that somebody didn't like? Or what if I'm not going to pass my exam? Or, I mean, this is the what ifing that goes on in our head. And what we do when we what if, well, and by the way, it's totally normal.
yeah,
Okay. I mean, we are primed to, number one, we're primed to anticipate the worst. That's the negativity bias that we have as human beings, because that's what
it's what
you
kept
know,
us alive,
that's what
right?
kept us
Yeah,
alive. Unfortunately, it's not necessarily all that helpful in society today, although it may feel like we're living in a jungle, but we're not, most of us. But so it's what if. And what that does as a normal response is your body gets affected.
yeah,
Okay. Your autonomic nervous system gets geared up, your heart rate, your muscles, your tension. And you then go into an aroused state where, number one, it's really difficult to think clearly.
yeah,
When we get anxious, okay, that very primitive part of our brain called the amygdala overrides our prefrontal cortex. So we can't think straight.
yeah,
So, anxiety, again, it's the uncertainty of a diagnosis of cancer that's the focus. Okay. But clearly, anxiety is not just for cancer patients. We
right.
all have it. We want certainty, we want control. All of us want control over what's going to happen.
Yeah,
And when we are thrust into an area where we don't feel control, whatever the content of that is, whether it's cancer treatment, whether it's a new job, whether it's, a divorce. I mean, it doesn't matter. Okay. We throw ourselves into the realm of feeling a loss of control, and then we get scared. Then
yeah,
we feel afraid. And one of the things that has become sort of my mantra, to use an Eastern phrase, even though it's quite Western, is I say to people, when you start what ifing, it's not what if, it's what now.
mm, yeah,
Because the only control we have is in the present moment.
right. It's the right now. Yeah,
So when
definitely.
the mind starts, well, what if this, and what if this, and what if this? Because our mind is like a puppy, it's always moving. Doesn't stay still. Okay. And we're talking to ourselves. I talk about this. That self-talk is happening all the time. I say to people, stop and think to yourself, it's not what if, it's what now. And
Yeah,
take a look at, what can I do now? What's in front of me now? Now,
Yeah.
the options may not be great in the moment, okay, but it is going to focus you and cause that anxiety to kind of just ratchet down a little bit.
Yeah.
So does that answer the
Yeah, yeah, no, it does. It's there's a great book called The Untethered Soul. I don't know if you've read it or
Mhm.
recommended it. Yeah, and where I think he calls it the inner roommate. And eh, I I heard from many different therapists and people when it came to my personal grief over losing my sister to cancer that when I cried, if after crying I felt better, I knew I was getting better, like I was actually moving through my grief. Well, that didn't happen for over a decade. But
Mhm.
when it happened, and I was driving across the country, I was moving from California to Alabama, and this was my day 3 of my drive through East Texas. And when I like it was it w I mean, when I cried, it went on for hours, and it wasn't just crying over my sister, it was crying over a marriage that I knew was gonna end, even though it hadn't officially yet, and I felt like that inner voice died too. Like, and it was the first time that I had felt better after crying since my sister had died. And that
Mhm.
took over a decade to happen. But ever since that happened, that inner voice really isn't there anymore. She's,
Mhm.
so I like to
Mhm.
say she died in East Texas somewhere.
A heck of a place for sure.
Yeah, so no, no, it really resonated with me. Another thing you talk about, which I think is really important, is rituals. And when you get a cancer diagnosis or again, any sort of serious illness, um, your rituals, if you have them, get blown up, whether
Mhm.
they are daily rituals or maybe they're, rituals with your family around holidays, whatever. And I really, really appreciate rituals and they keep me so grounded and they help with my anxiety. So I was wondering if how do you how do you help the people who come to you with maintaining rituals and or developing new rituals while they're
Mhm.
going through treatment?
I think your word is absolutely right in terms of grounding, you know. And again, I think the important thing for people to realize is that a ritual can be any activity that
Mhm.
has personal meaning to you. You know, it may be a ritual to stand in your backyard and look at your trees. You know, that can be a ritual. There's a certain constancy that I
Mhm.
think is important in rituals in terms of being able to mark something that's important to you. Now, you know, again, I mentioned in the book, I'll never forget a woman who was an amazing art therapist. When she was diagnosed with breast cancer, she took her hair that she cut off before treatment and made a nest for the birds. You
Oh,
know, I mean, it was just, you know, so her, you
yeah,
know, to begin with. But,
so
you know, I
lovely.
mean, I think for many of the women that I've worked with, they they establish a place in their home to go to focus on themselves. You know,
Mm,
some people call it an altar, you know,
yeah,
if you want to add a spiritual element to it. But I think a ritual is anything that brings meaning to you.
yeah,
And certainly, you know, if we look at religion, we see how much ritual there is.
yeah,
There's a constancy. There's a as when the world is spinning around us as it is, you know, to have something that you can go to and do or experience or communicate in some way. And again, it may be a ritual that you do by yourself
oh yeah, absolutely, oh
or
yeah,
it may be, you know, our traditional rituals, you know,
yeah,
and again, sometimes I think, quite honestly, finding something that's relevant for you and even doing it by yourself
yeah.
almost has more kind of oomph and power to it than, you know, the traditional Thanksgiving ritual.
Yeah.
I mean,
Oh,
just the
totally.
fact that you've created, and it doesn't have to be something, artsy crafty. I mean, it can be
Not at all.
anything, planting a tree, cutting a flower and spending time, looking at that flower. I mean, anything can be a ritual,
I
but
want to,
it defines that that's for you at that moment.
yeah, I want to share two or three quick ones. Well, first of all, I love this idea of going to a place in your house that's yours. So we live in an old house that was built in 1930, and the dining room is the biggest room in our house. But we don't
Mhm.
use it as a dining room, and we've gotten, some pushback from family, whatever, like, why don't you, buy this and use it as a dining room? We're like, two people live here and we have a breakfast room. And so we turned the dining room into what my partner calls the woo woo room because I insisted that the ceiling be painted dusty pink. And it does have this kind of woo woo quality. And it's got the original hardwood floors that are fantastic. And so it has become sort of our workout room. And there's, yoga mats and a bar. And I have
Mhm.
a wardrobe in there that has a mirror on it. And I have an altar that has another mirror. And it has this amazing, like the most comfortable chair in our whole house. And the dog gets in the woo woo chair, we call it, and watches me do yoga. And it's my favorite room in the house. It is the best room in the whole house. And it may seem like to others that we're not using it very well, but for us, it's like, no, this is like the room in our house where we go separately or together to exercise in some way, shape, or form. And we just love it. It's just a great room in our house.
Yeah, I mean, I think the rituals are coming not only in connection with other people, but in connection with yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that can be all kinds of activities and behaviors, and it doesn't have to be anything grand,
Yeah.
is what I'm saying. But it's communing with yourself,
Yeah.
finding a vehicle and a way to do that. And obviously, it also involves that with other people. It can be,
It can
but
be.
it doesn't have to be.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be. So,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, I just think it's really important. And a new ritual that I have now is I promised myself if I left Los Angeles that I would go back every year on Halloween because that was my sister's favorite holiday
Mhm.
and visit her grave because she's still buried in LA. She's buried actually in Hollywood. And COVID, no COVID, I mean, I didn't care. It did not matter to me. I still went. And it changed my trip, especially in 2020, less so in 2021. But it did change my trip tremendously in terms of people I could see and whatever. But it didn't matter because the whole point of that ritual for me is to go
Okay.
and be in LA on Halloween and visit her grave at least
Mhm.
once a year. That's the whole
Mhm.
point of the trip. Seeing people, seeing friends, that's just kind of,
Additional, yeah.
yeah, that's additional. Yeah. And so that's a very important ritual to me, but it only happens once a year.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
it's important.
Well, there are religions that mark the anniversary of someone's death on a yearly basis.
Yeah.
Judaism is one that does that. And, whether it's saying a prayer, whether it's lighting a candle, whether it's going to a service, whether it's going to the cemetery. I mean, those are rituals
Yeah.
that really help us manage our grief and our loss.
Yeah.
Because I say a lot, death ends a life, death does not end a relationship.
Oh, yeah, I know. I love that. I love
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
So, since we're talking about death, let's talk about the death conversation, the which
Okay.
which I always, always, always tell people. So this is on page 146 of your book, um,
Mhm.
fivewishes.org. I'm very familiar with it because I used to kind of I worked for an organization that focused on dying with dignity. And so I did a lot of advanced directive
Directives.
workshops in the community and stuff. Um, so I would really love for you to talk about this because I always tell people have the death conversation before you get sick. I mean, we usually don't until we get sick, but it's so important to have it before you get sick. So can you tell people what this conversation is and what this
Sure.
tool is called
Sure.
Five Wishes?
Well, I think the five wishes is a tool that's been around a long time, and basically, let me just say this: this chapter, navigating the exit route, is really about death,
Yeah.
because everyone who has been diagnosed with cancer, when that diagnosis comes up, they think about, am I going to die from this? That
Of
is
course.
just, and again, it is not a death sentence to get a cancer diagnosis, but the reality is that for many people, we often don't think about that we're going to die, even though we know it, you know. But the reality is that for many people, it's the first time where they're
Yeah.
beginning to even face this. I want to just do one aside before we dive into the five wishes. I really want to push the conversationproject.org, which is
Yeah.
an online portal that allows people to begin to think about questions about death and dying, how they want to talk to people, what they want to say, what they don't want to say, all
Yeah.
kinds of things. The reality is that this is a conversation that people don't want to have often until it's too late.
Yeah.
And the reality is, and I say this, most of us plan every event in our lives that are big, important events.
Right. Yeah.
This event is going to happen
Yeah.
for
This
each of
is this
us.
is a guarantee,
You
right?
know, this one's
This is a
guaranteed,
guarantee.
and denying that it's going to happen is not necessarily going to change the fact that we are all mortal. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to be on the edge of life to be dying to have this conversation. In fact, as you say, that is not the best time, I
It's
should
not the best
say.
time.
It's not the best time. Now, the five wishes are all about taking a look at, who do you want to make healthcare decisions for you?
Yeah. Very
Okay, who do you
important.
trust and who do you not want involved? Okay, what kind of medical treatment do you want or you don't want? Now, let's recognize that as life changes, what you think you want and what you're willing to do may
Right.
also
Changes.
change. Okay, this is not written in stone,
Oh, of
to
course not.
use a
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
use a
Yeah.
bad metaphor of a gravestone, but this is a fluid kind of conversation, but it is one that is not just for the sick and elderly.
Right.
I
Right.
mean, life changes in a minute.
Yep. Oh, yeah.
And again, we prepare for so many events in our life, every detail, every
Yep.
detail. And what this does, and I'll get back to the other wishes, but what this does is it empowers you, because you have a sense of, I have thought about this, I have considered what my options are, what's important to me. And again, you may change your mind as your life changes,
Can I
but
add something there? Just
yeah.
yeah, about that, about advanced directive and your healthcare wishes. So when I was doing these workshops, one thing we always said was, yes, you could absolutely change this. And there are sort of 5D pillars about when to change it. That, one, if there's been a death in your family, usually you want to look back because sometimes a death in your family makes you rethink what you may or may not want. Divorce, absolutely, because often your spouse is your healthcare proxy. And I know I had to change my advance directive when I got a divorce. Every decade, you should look at it no matter what. If there's been any kind of decline in your health, even if there hasn't been an official diagnosis. And then, of course, number 5 is a diagnosis of a serious disease. You should definitely take a look at your advance directive. So,
Those are really important ways for people to be able to anchor
yeah.
how they begin to adjust this kind of thing. I think another part of the five wishes, one of the five wishes, is to think about, you know what's important to you in terms of pain and comfort,
Yep.
and your own cognitive awareness.
So
I
important.
mean, what how do you want to be treated with regard to pain? you
Yeah.
know um how do you want people to treat you? What's important to you? I mean, so many people want to die at home.
Oh, of
Many
course.
people want to die at home. What is a good death is
Yeah.
certainly an individual question. And the other part in terms of these five wishes is, who do you want involved in this process? And again, who do you not want involved?
Right. Yeah.
And I come to write this chapter not just because of its relevance with a potentially life-threatening illness, but working with people over the years and having, let's say, for example, someone in the family die without this discussion, and
Oh,
what happens to the
I
family
know.
system when this one thinks mom or dad wants that, or
It
sister,
it tears
and
people apart. It
it
tears
tears
them
it
apart.
tears families apart.
Yeah, it really does.
And it is so sad at a time when families hopefully would be there to support one another.
You know, what
That that's a big reason.
yeah. What I tell people is, especially if they're afraid to have conversations with their adult children, I always tell them it gives me great comfort and total relief that I know exactly what my father wants. Now,
Absolutely.
my stepmother is his proxy, but I'm the backup, and I have his will, but I also have his advance directive, and I know exactly what he wants. I know what he wants, not just in terms of his healthcare wishes, but I know what he wants in terms of a funeral. I know that he doesn't want to be buried. He wants to be cremated. I know where he wants his ashes spread. I know all of it. And it feels good because I'm not going to have to make any decisions. I'm just going to honor the ones that he's already made. That's all I have to
Absolutely.
do.
Absolutely. I mean, what a gift.
It is a true
It
gift.
is, and I say this, to have this conversation is a gift of love. It
Absolutely.
is really a gift of love to the people that you
It
care
is.
about, and it's a tough decision. I'm not decision, it's a tough
It is a
conversation,
tough conversation, but I
but it's the other piece of it is we want to maintain as much of a sense of personal integrity and control as possible.
yeah,
And the reality is the medical community is going to do everything they think they need to do to keep you alive.
that's what they're supposed to
Okay?
do.
That's what they're supposed to
Yeah,
do.
that's their job.
That is their job. And if you want something different, it's got to be communicated.
Yeah.
That's the control that you have before to put this together, so you can communicate that while you're able.
So this okay, people get mad. People are probably gonna get mad at me as I preface this right now with this example, but, years ago, 7, 8 years ago, when I was still married and living in Los Angeles, my husband had a cat he brought into the marriage, and so did I, and they were about 6 months apart in age, so essentially the same age. And as they got older, they had very different health issues. So my cat, male cat, when by the time he was 13, he had two essentially broken knees that could not go through surgery. He could walk just fine, but he was clearly in pain. But he couldn't go through surgery because he had diabetes, and but he was 100% with it mentally, and his vision was perfect, his hearing was perfect, but I mean, his daily living was definitely painful, and he got insulin shots twice a day,
Mm.
so it was not a necessarily great quality of life. And then his cat, she was healthy in terms of no diabetes, her bones were fine. I don't even think she had arthritis, this cat, but she was deaf or going deaf. She was half blind for sure, and we're pretty convinced that she had Kitty's Alzheimer's because she started going into rooms and then just sitting there and looking around and clearly trying to figure out where she
Yeah,
was
it
and why she
was.
was there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I did this kind of on my personal Facebook, I did this thing like, which would you rather be? Because if you'd rather be her, she didn't have the cognitive ability to know that anything was wrong. I mean, on the surface, hands down, she was a happier cat, and she did actually live longer than he did. I think by a whole year. Yeah, a year.
Mhm.
And but he had all of his mental, faculties, and physically, it was not a good, like, last year and a half, and he actually did die from a diabetic seizure.
Hmm.
And it was very interesting how split down the middle people were. It
Hmm.
was very interesting.
Yeah, wouldn't it be nice if we had a choice as to how
Yeah.
we wanted
Yeah, I know, I know.
what disease and what was going to
I know,
befall us, you
exactly.
know?
Um,
We could just check it off, you
yeah.
know?
Oh, okay, I gotta share one more thing, and then we're gonna switch to another topic that nobody likes to talk about, or maybe talks about even less than death. So when I was in college as an undergrad, and I was in a general ed, like, psych class or something, and I went up to the professor, talked all about brain chemistry and everything, and I went up to the professor after one particular discussion, and I asked her, I just said, "Well, I want to ask you a question about something." I said, "My maternal grandmother had Alzheimer's for 10 years and then passed away peacefully in her sleep. And my mother was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis a couple of years ago. And, and then I said, so what do you think?" And I couldn't even finish my question because the look on her face was so bad. The look on her face was so terrible. And I was like, okay, great. Great. So just, no, nothing's wrong, but still, it was just like, oh, okay. So my chances of getting something in that, something wrong with my brain are
You
maybe a
know,
little
I
higher.
think we all try to certainly look at our family histories, and
Right.
figure out, well, what what's the odds of,
Right.
and again, we make health choices to try to, maintain ourselves to the best of our ability, but you know, bad things happen to good people
All the time, which is one of the great
all
books you
the time.
recommended. Great
Yeah.
book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it just there isn't a lot of fairness
No, no, there's
sometimes,
not.
but being able to let the people you know and care about who are going to be responsible for you when you aren't able to speak for yourself is truly a gift of love.
It is a gift of
So,
love. All right. Speaking of love, and
hmm.
let's move away from death. Let's talk about another topic that no one ever wants to talk about. I thought this was brilliant in your book. Let's talk about sex and intimacy.
Okay. All
You have
right.
this great tool on page one or page
82.
82 called
Hmm.
Crest.
Right. Right.
And so for improving your sex life, and I would love for you to just tell us what Crest is and how
Okay.
you came up with the tool.
Okay. Well, I will tell you, I will not take personal accounting for this. This is a tool that is referenced in the book, but it's from a very well-known psychologist who's done work in sexuality for a long time. So let me tell you what CREST is. First of all, the reality is that when one deals with physical illness, um, their body, their body image, their hormones, their chemistry, everything changes. And this is particularly relevant for many women who have breast cancer. Not only is it body image change with their breast, but it is often hormonal changes,
Yeah,
whether they
sure.
are kicked into menopause or whether they're having to take medication that is estrogen blocking. Sexuality is also a mind, body, spirit
Yeah.
situation,
Yeah, totally
okay,
agree.
and topic. So CREST is just an acronym, and the C in CREST is, well, let me just back up for just a minute. The last thing that many people think about is being physically sexual and
Hmm.
intimate, okay, when they're sick.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I want to also say that sexuality is not always about intercourse.
Hmm.
Okay, it is about intimacy and
Yeah, that
physical,
connection. That
that
connection.
intimal that intimacy and that physical connection.
Yeah.
Okay, does not necessarily have to always be genital. Okay, but just to put that as an aside when we
Yeah.
talk about sexuality. So first of all is the C is creativity. How can you bring more of a childlike playfulness and enjoyment? Okay, we have so many receptors on our skin, to bring us pleasure. This
Yeah.
is the idea. It's about pleasure, and it's so difficult but important. you got to get out of your head.
Yeah.
Okay. Because being intimate or physical with someone means you got to be present. You
Yeah.
got to be there in
Yeah.
mind and body, okay, which is often a difficult task. No,
Yeah.
no two words, it's true. Okay, but there's creativity. Where's there a sense of fun and playfulness and enjoyment? Enjoyment. It's mutual pleasuring.
Right.
That's an important concept. Mutual pleasuring, and then the R is respect.
Right.
There cannot be physical intimacy without feeling respect and
Yeah. That's an important one.
respected. Respected. Okay. Do you respect yourself enough to ask for what you want? Do you
Mm.
feel respected outside of the bedroom?
Yeah.
That plays a big role in improved sexual life.
Yeah.
The excitement. We all need things to look forward to,
Sure.
okay? Especially when we're challenged with illness. So, can you change things up?
Yeah.
Can you keep it from being the same old, boring? This is what we do. This is da 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 da. Da. How about switching it up? And look, nobody's talking about doing something weird or kinky. We're just talking about,
But but
getting a little
but
more
you can do that too.
spontaneous.
It's okay.
Absolutely. I mean, I always say when I work with couples, because I've done marital counseling for a long time, whatever is acceptable for two people. Okay, that's what matters. There has to be respect and there has to be agreement.
Yeah.
And then there's the S of Crest for sensitivity. You have to feel that you are being treated with kindness and valued for not only what you do, but who you are.
Yeah.
You have to feel that sense, that connection, and paying attention to your partner takes safety and comfort. That's where the physical intimacy comes. That comes after.
Yeah.
There's a sense of safety and sensitivity. And then the T, which is really pretty obvious, you got to spend time together.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know particularly couples with young children, there's so little time. They're pulled in so many different directions and it's hard. But I often say your relationship is like a garden. And if you don't tend it, you're going to get a lot of weeds.
Yeah.
And it doesn't take a lot of time for us to distance ourselves and build walls.
Yeah.
And that's what you want to prevent. You really want to do some prevention work and recognizing I need to spend time with my partner. We need to go and take a walk. We need to I have tools in here called the daily temperature reading where you just spend 10 minutes, connecting with one another. No big heavy duty conversations, but just time to focus on one another. You matter to me. And that's how intimacy gets built.
I especially love that one because with my now ex-husband, many people in our lives said to us, either me or him separately, but they said to us that they couldn't understand why we didn't spend a lot of time together. And we felt like we did, but he had a really more so than me, he had a really exhausting work schedule. He worked in film and TV, so he could be on a set for 14 hours. I mean, easily, and it wasn't always daytime. And then at one point in our marriage, he actually left the state and worked on a show that was out of state. So I almost never saw him. And but we always felt like, well, quality time together was not a top love language for either one of us at all. Wasn't it was like number 5 out of 5. It was not the top one. But now, my partner now that I've been with almost 7 years, um, I still don't feel like that's my top love language,
Mhm.
but we love spending time together. We love spending time together,
You
and
know, I
it's
think
my
I think it's
favorite
yes
time of the day.
quality. It's yes, it's less quality than quantity than
Then
it's
it's quality.
quality.
Yeah, yeah,
And being really present
yeah,
when you are spending time with that person in that way.
yeah,
Because you know as well as I do, you can be with somebody and you can be miles away emotionally,
yeah,
So being present is
yeah.
That is the greatest gift we can give anybody is our
Yeah, it's our
presence.
in our time. Yeah.
Yeah, and our presence, our focus.
All right, let's wrap this up because your book, again, for people, Your Journey Beyond Breast Cancer Tools for the Road. You can get this on Amazon in just a moment. Dr. Lubin will tell us how we can get in touch with her, but tell us what these big C's are in cancer. And this is toward the end of your book on, I
Okay.
think it's the last chapter, and it's on page
Okay.
178.
Okay. This is the big C's that I think play a role in moving forward. One is building your confidence.
Mm,
What is something that perhaps you've wanted to do that you've not done before? Okay. Be aware if you're telling yourself, I can't do that, you
mm,
know. Try try to stretch, try to develop your confidence so that you can communicate what you want
mm,
and you can affect the change that you want. And again, these are kind of big C's that may apply to everybody, but this is a big one, the
yeah.
confidence, the commitment. Okay. Commitment and consistency. Is there one thing you've started and not finished? Is there something you want to commit yourself to do, but you haven't taken the time to do that? What are your goals? Set a goal. It can be a tiny goal, okay? And make a commitment and be consistent and follow that through. That's part of coming back and owning yourself and developing your sense of self. Clarity. What is it that what are some of the behaviors that you really want to change and you're not changing?
Yeah.
Okay. Are there some bad habits that you're doing? It may be something just as simple as I got to stop eating dessert every night.
Yeah.
Maybe I really don't need that piece of cake every night. It can be
Right.
something as small as that. And choose a specific behavior. I talk about this in the book and really hone down on how you're going to change it, when you're going to start.
Mm, good advice.
Writing things down is often important. The other one is courage. You
Mm,
really need courage when you're facing the unknown and you're facing the challenges of any major life change like cancer. Fear and risk go together. There's no getting around that. I do want to just quote you one quote here because this is my favorite, and I actually reached out to this person. Well, I reached out to everybody in the book who I quoted, but this is from Mary Catherine Bateson. Fear is not a good teacher. The lessons of fear are quickly forgotten.
mm,
We are not what we know, but what we are willing to learn.
mm.
And she actually just died this past year. She is a
Oh,
very, very well known anthropologist person. So I love that quote. And then the last C another C that I talk about is coaching and competence. Okay. Is there something that you need to learn? And do you need to seek out someone to help you learn that? Do you need the support like that?
yeah.
And you got to learn how to gather information when you're a patient. You've got
Yeah.
to be part of the process.
Yeah.
Okay. And that requires your owning the fact that you've got to do that work.
Yeah.
That's going to be empowering to feel more competent and less afraid. Community. We can't do any major challenge in life all by ourselves,
Yeah.
and we need community. And are there people in your community that you need to resolve relationships with? That's another part of moving forward, and finding a way to reduce some of that negative energy. So those are just, and honestly, one of the things that you said at the beginning, Andrew, that I think is really quite true. This book is certainly about cancer, but it's also about the tools that we need to cope. I call them life skills
Yeah.
is what I call them. And again, this is not an inclusive book of that. I wish I had all those answers, but it is my way of trying to communicate some of them. So that's
Oh,
yeah.
well, it's excellent, and I wanna say one more thing about community. I really didn't understand what community meant until I went through this phenomenal yoga teacher training, um, gosh, almost 10 years ago, and it really helped me understand the difference between friends and community. And I will say the one thing about uprooting my life and moving across the country was having to rebuild communities. But what I have found is that some communities don't go away just because you left.
Mhm.
You just might
Mhm.
not see them as often. And so, one community I still sort of tangentially, I think that's the word I'm looking for, have is I had this great sort of wine community from this wine
Mhm.
tasting group. And except for the first year of COVID, again, when I go back to LA, I always try to see them. I always try to
Uh-huh.
see this group of people, and they know we get to taste wine together once a year. That's it. But I still have this community, and um, I think that's one of the hardest things that I've heard from survivors is during that time you have a community, and often it's other patients in the infusion clinic, or it's that team of doctors you've built, and when that community just is gone, there's there's that sense of loss too. So I'm really glad you talked about community because
Yeah,
it's
and
not
I
not
would
easy.
just say this for a lot of women that I have worked with over the years in organizations. Women get a lot of support through community of other women
Yeah,
with breast cancer, and those kinds of groups provide a real place of healing and comfort. After the medical community steps back,
yeah,
kind of thing, and
yeah.
so yeah, absolutely. We No man is an island, no man lives alone. Trite expression, but so true.
All right. If people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way?
Okay. The best way is to go onto my website, www.manypathstohealing.com. And there's a place there. It's Dr. Lubin at manypathstohealing.com. I encourage you to go there. I am working to continue to put out blogs on there. There are resources, tools. I'm an ex-teacher, so there's lots of tools,
Lots of tools. I love it. I love it.
lots of tools, and for you to use like a toolbox. Pick them as you need them, and leave the ones that you don't need, in there for a rainy day if you need it. And so it's www.manypathstohealing.com, and you can get me through there, and email me. And I encourage anyone who would like to reach out. And I really want to thank you, Andrea, for giving me this opportunity to share my
Oh,
book.
you're very welcome. And can they find the book on your website or
That
Amazon?
they
Where's the
can
best place?
find the book on the website.
Great.
The book is available at Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and through the publisher iUniverse. So there's a thing on the bottom page of the homepage that gives you
Great.
a way to look and get an example of the book too to look at.
Great.
So
All right. Thank
absolutely.
you so much, Dr. Lubin.
Thank
It's been
you. Thank you.
awesome.
All right. Take care, and my best to
Bye-bye.
everyone. Thanks for listening.